Hey everybody, Jeff Morrell here with eXp Realty. Hope you're doing well. Hey, I've been thinking about doing this for a while now. We are definitely in a shifting market. Definitely things very different from what we've seen in the last couple of years. I've been a realtor now for 20 years, and anyway, been through all kinds of different things. I thought it was time to kind of dig in and maybe share some things. Number one, for the realtors out there, I got realtors I'm working with from all over the country, so this is going to be more of a nationwide sort of overlook of what's going on right now in the market. But also, if you're buying, looking to buy, thinking about buying, if you're thinking to sell, whatever, there's a lot of things that you'll be able to pick up here as well. So anyway, let's get right into it here. A July housing market update. Okay. So, the economic slowdown. This is a topic we're seeing right now, of course, everywhere. We're hearing about it a lot in our business. What would it mean to our business here at real estate? Well, I want to talk about recession and really how does that impact real estate? There's a lot of this that we can't control, but what can we control? As realtors, we certainly can't control how we educate our clients, our confidence, the knowledge that we have about economic slowdown. And I'll start here from the Wall Street Journal. Recession fear surge among CEOs, and new survey suggests. They go on to say 3/4 of global CEOs say that we are in a recession or will be in the next 12 to 18 months, according to a new survey. So there's that widely held definition of a recession, 2 consecutive quarters of a negative GDP. Well, we saw negative GDP in the first quarter, and in the second quarter here, we just wrapped that up as I'm recording this. There are forecasts coming out of the Atlanta Fed saying that we will have a negative GDP here in the second quarter. Some of the estimates have been very, very low, what they would call anemic growth in this country, 0.3%. So as we look at this, we're going to say, hey, the economy is slowing down. We're likely in a recession, but that as of today is not out there. But I think there's a high likelihood that it will be. There's a lot outside of our control when it comes to this topic, but there are things in our control, like how in the past, has our business, the real estate business, been affected by an economic slowdown, more specifically recessionary times. So I want to talk about that for the next few minutes and give you some of the latest information. I'll start right here with mortgage specialist. Throughout history and during a recessionary period, interest rates go up at the beginning of the recession. But in order to come out of a recession, interest rates are lowered to stimulate the economy moving forward. Historically, we've seen repeated uptick in interest rates followed by lower interest rates. So if you've been in the business a while, this is not something I think is going to surprise you. Maybe if you're new to the business over the last couple, 2-3 years, you don't know that, then that's typically what happens as an economic cycle. But what I want to give you, a couple of graphics that really crystallize this thought of what happens during recessionary times. We can learn from what's happened in the past, and then we can apply our wisdom, our local market expertise, everything that we bring to the table through that. So if we go back and look at these prior recessionary periods, I would start right here. This is a graphic going all the way back to the early 70s. And this outline in blue, the graph mark, there's the 30-year fixed interest rate. Then the boxes there that are highlighted in yellow, those are recessionary periods. So if I was talking to somebody about this, I might use this graphic. I might have it on my phone or on a tablet. In fact, I've got this on my laptop right now. Something that, I can walk, prospective clients, sellers, buyers, walk them through this, okay? This is what typically interest rates have looked like in a recessionary period. I'm going to give you another look at this here in just a minute, but I think it starts to bring this perspective, and certainly here on the other end, the rise in interest rates that we've seen more recently here in the first 6 months of this year. But then if we break this down and sort of convert it to a table, in each recession that we've had in this country, going back to the early 80s, what has happened to the mortgage interest rate? This gives you that from when it actually happened, how long it happened, and what was the starting interest rate and what did it fall to. There's one thing that every one of these recessions has in common, and it's that in each instance, mortgage rates fell. And there are reasons for that. I'm going to go back into that in just a minute. But we can use this graphic, not necessarily just my opinion. It's not what I think or what I've seen. This is verified information. We can show them graphically. We can show them in a table like this right here. Here's what happens in a recessionary period. So the reason I bring that up is not to say that in every recession going forward, that's going to happen. We don't have a crystal ball, but when somebody asks, how would a recession affect the real estate business? Well, what we've seen in the past is that interest rates have been lowered. And here's to take that, just a step further. Here's what specifically, that's meant. Over the past five recession mortgage, let me start over. Over the past five recessions, mortgage rates have fallen an average of 1.8 percentage points from the peak seen during the recession to the trough. And in many cases, they continue to fall after the fact, as it takes some time to turn things around, even when the recession is technically over. Okay, let's pause here for a second. Again, I want to remind you a few things. A lot of you that understand this technically will know this, but the reason for this, all the work the Fed is doing right now, is to tame inflation. They're raising the Fed funds rate to tame inflation. To do that, they have to slow down the economy. And you've heard them talk about trying to engineer the soft landing. Well, if you don't engineer the soft landing, then you end in recession. Okay, going back to that first survey that the CEO said, we're either in a recession or we're heading towards one. Because the reason they say we're either in one is because it will be identified by what's, happened in the past in the way that we've always defined recession. Remember, I said 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. Well, if they don't engineer that soft landing, we go into recession. And what does the Fed then know? Well, the impact of housing in this country is tremendous. Housing will lead the economy out of a recession. That's what it's done in the past. The U.S. economy will not recover until housing leads the way out. So that's the reason why you see these cyclical events happen when it comes to an economic slowdown. I want to emphasize, recession doesn't equal a housing crisis. Go all the way back to the early 80s. What happened to housing prices? Well, 4 out of the 6 times we were in a recession, homes appreciated. 2 times they fell. Once marginally here in the early 90s, you can see that. The other time was in 2008. The thing I'd say here is ever since 2008, the word recession has taken on a whole new meaning for people, and for very good reason. There are a lot of people that were hurt back in 2008 and the years that followed. A lot of people who were impacted, a lot of people who saw family members that were hurt. During the 2008 recession, our business was at the epicenter, and any of us that were in the business certainly remember those days. Certainly remember the times that we went through during that. Nothing easy about it. But I think we have to have a solid understanding of what's happening. I think as we're watching the economic pressures around us and people are still wondering, I still want to buy a home. Are there going to be options available? It's been such a tight market on inventory over the past couple of years. Well, everyone wants to know what's the latest with inventory. Let's start with a breakdown of a few key trends that we're seeing in the market and then lead into how that's impacting inventory. Okay, offers received. Well, we're seeing that number decline. It peaked around an average of 5.5 offers in April. Then it dropped to 5. Now we're seeing about 4.2. That was the latest number released in June. And what that means is this rising mortgage rate environment is really starting to soften buyer demand. Now think about it. Though 4.2 offers per home sold is still far above a pre-pandemic norm. So definitely still a competitive market, but we're seeing a little bit of that softening or that moderation. What we're also seeing is the offers over asking is declining. So a month ago, 61% of offers were over asking price. And that number has softened now to 55% over asking price on the average home sold. Now, think about that too. That's still more than half of offers over asking. So certainly a softening or a moderation, but definitely not a huge decline. Now, what we're also seeing right now is that sales are softening as well. So a slower pace of sales. I'm going to spend a few minutes here breaking this down today, showing you some visuals on why sales are lowering as well. With all these factors in play, what does that mean for inventory? That's the big question. Inventory is on the rise, so that means more options for buyers coming to the market. Here's a quote from Mark Fleming. Okay, there's been a pickup in the inventory that we've seen recently, but it's not from a big increase in new listings. So put a pin in that thought because we're going to go back to that here in just a second, but rather a slowdown in the pace of sales. And remember that month's supply measures the inventory of sales relative to the pace of sales. Same inventory, fewer sales means more months supply. So let's take a deeper look at what this means. So we know that the month's supply of inventory of homes is increasing. It was record low back in January of this year at 1.6 months. And we've ticked up the latest data showing us 2.6 months of inventory. Again, this is nationwide. Right here in Colorado Springs where I'm at, just a little over 1 month supply as of today that I'm recording this. Now that's not a huge increase, but it certainly means more options for buyers when there's more inventory on the market. Now remember, a balanced market, however, that's 6 months of inventory, and we haven't seen that since 2012. So we're nowhere near, being out of the woods on where we need to be with inventory to meet that balanced market, but we're certainly moving in that direction. So why is that? That's the big question. Well, new monthly listing counts are increasing. That's what you can see here from Realtor.com. You can see the green bars are last year, the blue bars are this year, 2022. So what two things really pop out to me when I look at this graph? I see the blue bars going higher here these last couple of months. So more new inventory, more new listings coming to the market this year, and they're ticking up at a faster pace. So April to May, those blue bars from this year, that's increasing at a faster pace than we did last year at this time. That's huge. That means that there are more new listings coming to the market for buyers, and there are more options available. But what's happening at the same time, and this is what you heard in that quote from Mark Fleming, is that the pace of sales is slowing. So let me show you what that looks like. So this is the existing home sales, seasonally adjusted annual rate from NAR, the National Association of Realtors. What you can see in the orange bar over on the right is that we're projected, to end the year at 5.4 million home sales by the end of 2022. If we continue at the pace we're selling homes today. Now, we know that that pace is softened because of rising rates, economic pressures, inflation, all the things that are impacting the housing market right now. So the pace of sales is slowing. And when you compare that to last year and the year before, we have to remember that it's slower than then because those are absolutely incredible years. I mean, they were an anomaly in the housing market. I've been in this 20 years plus. I've never seen anything like the last couple of years. But where we are today, in that orange bar is returning more towards the direction of those pre-pandemic years, 2018, 2019. And we need to remember that those were great years in real estate. So when we think about this contextually, yes, the pace of sales is slowing, but we're slowing back to the pre-pandemic years, which were fantastic years for the housing market. So with new listings, coming to the market and the pace of sales slowing, what does that mean? Let's start here with this quote from Lawrence Hume. Home sales have essentially returned to the level seen in 2019 prior to the pandemic after 2 years of gangbuster performance. So, there are more options available, more active inventory on the market. Daniel Hale from Realtor.com says active inventory continued to grow, rising 21% above 1 year ago. That's huge for buyers, right? In other words, we're starting to add more options, but the market needs even more before home shoppers have a selection that's roughly equivalent to the pre-pandemic housing market. So we still have far more buyers than we have sellers. That's continuing to put upward pressure on prices. We know that to be true. Not enough options out there, but certainly more coming to the market. So what does that look like for the rest of this year? Well, Realtor.com has reforecasted for the rest of 2022. It's the 2022 forecast update on inventory. And what it shows us is that at the beginning of the year, Realtor.com projected that we would have a 0.3% increase in inventory, so very small. They've reforecasted that for the rest of the year, a 15% increase in inventory. A lot of that largely has to do with the softening or the slowing in the pace of sales and that uptick in new listings. So more inventory coming to the market. They're seeing more in the projections. That's going to create more options for buyers. And this is the message that as realtors, we need to share. If you're a buyer, understand this. We need to get out there as realtors and let buyers know that more options are going to be coming available. This means, we should start to see less competition, fewer bidding wars, and therefore less upward price pressure. Let's talk about that here in a moment. In fact, a simple analysis shows that a 1 month increase in the month supply, which is exactly what we've seen this year, results in a 3% decline in annualized house price growth. And our preliminary house price index is already showing moderation in house prices, in April. So what we're seeing is with a softening in demand, more new listings, slower pace in sales, more inventory is available. And when there's more inventory available, that tug of war between buyer demand and supply lessens. That means less upward pressure on prices. So prices are still projected to increase just at a more moderate rate. That's already what we're starting to see. Prices are still ticking up, but at a slower, more moderate pace. So we're going to see an increase in prices, no doubt, because supply is so low. What we are seeing is a lessening in that price pressure. This is good for buyers. It was nearly impossible a year ago to find a home. I get that. And if you stepped out of the market as a buyer a year ago, step back in, because it's still going to be difficult, but it's certainly not going to be impossible. You will have more options. With more options available in the market, now is the time to jump back into the process and really find that home that you've been looking for. Okay? With more inventory coming to the market, I think buyers want to know, should I buy a home, right now? Is this the time? Many people are talking about that. Does it make sense? I think this is even bigger than the interest rate question right now. The average mortgage payment has gone up significantly, and that's a barrier to home ownership for so many people. And it causes offers to pause, and we're certainly seeing, that in the market. But more than that, nobody wants to buy anything that's going to be worth less 6 months, 12 months down the road, right? I don't care what you're talking about. You don't want to buy anything that's going to lose value significantly. Maybe there's some things you could argue, maybe a car you buy and you kind of understand that, but most people don't want that in their homes. They want to be, have that to be an appreciating asset. I'd start here and break down sort of the national and local headlines that are bearing down on people. The cooling housing market enters the great deceleration. Home prices decelerate as the housing market downshifts. Buying a home at the wrong time can backfire big time. These are the headlines that are sort of pummeling consumers right now about the housing market. And certainly we are in a decelerating time right now. We will not see the appreciation going forward that we've seen, in the past few years here. And that's a good thing, right? If we get honest with ourselves, many of us that are in the business have said we cannot continue to see appreciation like we've seen over the last 24 months. And by the way, we want to see more inventory in the market and sort of this frenzy to subside and go away. And rising interest rates, well, they're certainly moderating the market. But I think our message right now as realtors needs to be that decelerating home prices do not mean depreciating home prices. Price reductions, and certainly things like that are dominating our business, and many people are talking about them. But a decelerating environment means there's not as much appreciation as what we've seen in the past. I'm going to go into that in just a minute, but what that means for forecasters. But the analogy I always love to use on this is this picture right here. You've got a road that kind of goes off and you can't see around the bend. Maybe there's a cop sitting up there and you're flying down this highway doing well over the speed limit, 80, 90 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, whatever, close to it. You have to slow down when you come around that curve and see that cop sitting there. He's going to give you a ticket, right? So you slow down around 60 miles an hour. The speed limit is 65, but whatever it is, it feels like you're going a whole lot slower, going from 90 down to 60. Well, that's the analogy I'd use in this market every time I talk to somebody about what's happening in prices. Deceleration is very different from depreciation. A price reduction is very different from depreciating home values. We're in a time right now as the market shifts where a lot of people have priced their homes aspirationally. There are a lot of sellers right now that haven't adjusted to the market that we're in right now. When you're priced aspirationally or you're trying to catch the market, you're seeing market shifts, you're going to have to make a price reduction. And the reality is that home was likely overpriced to start with. Pricing right now is critical in today's market. Now, let's look at the difference between deceleration and depreciation, because all the forecasters, we see are calling for appreciation. The average of these forecasters, 8.5%. Now, I think this is an important point that we need to focus on. Forecasters are calling for appreciation this year, but we have to really understand why they're calling for appreciation. I'm going to get into that here in just a couple of slides. But when you look across this, from Fannie to Freddie to CoreLogic, all these forecasters, the average of 8.5% appreciation, not what we saw last year, tremendous appreciation. We said, oh man, this feels too hot. And coming in this year was something a little bit more normal. Now these forecasts, started the year at about 5%. They've ratcheted up here the last few months. They've kind of settled in right here about 8.5%. So this is the up-to-date forecast for this year, this calendar year 2022. Next, I want to look at home price expectation survey. This is 100 economists, housing market experts, those that are in the know with housing across the country. They survey every quarter and they say, what do you see for appreciation this year and the 4 years ahead that make a 5-year window? And you can see right here from the home price expectation survey, 9.3% appreciation, sort of in line with what we saw in the other forecasters, 8.5%, right in that range, the average from the last slide I just showed you. Then you look here over the next, 4 years, 4.19%, 3.12%, back to 4% appreciation in 2026, again, my message right now, based on what experts are saying, is you're likely to see a good appreciation this year. The average appreciation, going back to where we've been, around normal, about 3.8%, average, residential homes across the country. We're heading back into that over the next few years, back to more of a normal nationwide appreciation. So there's been a video circulating, around from Dave Ramsey, where he talks about the number of people in the market and why homes aren't going to lose value. It's very compelling. It's been shared by a lot of people. Maybe you've seen it. If you haven't, you can go look it up. I pulled a quote out of that video, and he says this, because I think it's very important for us to listen to the root issue of what drives house prices. Almost always supply and demand. I agree 1,000%. It goes on to say now interest rates affect that. That's true too. When interest rates go up, guess what? Fewer buyers. Exactly what we're seeing right now. The demand goes down, thus prices are going to soften or not be as cray-cray, his words there, as they have been. And that's a good thing. That's what we're seeing right now. I don't think there's a better summation of what drives the market and what's happening right now. So I want to give you two graphics that I think do a tremendous job of visually conveying why experts are calling for home price appreciation when many think, gosh, this doesn't sound good. The economy is slowing down. Remember, we've seen tremendous appreciation in the last couple of years, and we can't sustain it. It's not sustainable. So let's break this down, what he says. The root issue that always drives house prices is supply and demand. Okay, so first, let's cover supply. This is a little bit different take. Everything in the blue there, every year, these are the number of single-family housing units brought to market from 1970 to 2008. Everything before the housing crisis, okay? In the dotted line, that's the average annual units completed. That references the 50-year average in the number of homes brought to market. So you look at this, for the last 14 years, the gray bars right there, we've been below the 50-year average in the number of builds brought to market, okay? So think about that, this is how we know we're undersupplied. That's a big topic, but this graphic will give people sort of a picture of what this actually looks like. And certainly this year, builders are bringing units to market, at a higher pace. We will most likely surpass the 50-year average this year. They're trying to bring this back, but they can't do it overnight. All right, so that's the supply side. Well, what's driving demand? This is a graphic that I think you can use as a realtor to communicate demand. I'm going to give you a couple of key statistics that are in here, okay? Now, I'm going to put all the links to all the reports I've used to put this together in the description, and you can go back and read all these so you can really understand all this at a deeper level. But the demand side is driven by the size of the millennials that are moving through the market. I've isolated here in blue the millennial generation, the largest generation behind the baby boomers, just a little bit behind in sheer size of that generation, but they're moving through their peak home buying years. The peak home buying years are between the ages of 20 and 35. According to NAR, in their recent home buyer survey, 81% of first-time home buyers fall into this category, in this age range. 43% of all buyers fit into this category. So tremendous demand, tremendous volume coming from those that want to buy, driven primarily by the millennial generation. So let's go back to review. We have these two graphics. We have the one here that shows we have a lack of supply that's been coming to market for the last 14 years. Now builders are trying to do that. We have a tremendous demand right here in millennials and people that are moving through their peak home buying years. That sort of gives a picture of what Dave Ramsey said in that video and the quote that we use. I think all that leads up to this slide right here, okay? Experts don't believe the market is in a bubble or a crash is in the cards like during the Great Recession. And I think we're starting to see that. Certainly on the news and articles and things like that, even people outside of our business are saying it's way different from 2008. But they still go on to say the nation is still suffering from a housing shortage that has reached crisis proportions at a time when many millennials are reaching the age when they consider home ownership. Absolutely true. And that is keeping upward pressure on prices. So as a realtor, being sound in that explanation and having the confidence of that information is what we have to do. But we have to acknowledge this is an emotional conversation. This is an emotional fear that many people have right now out in the real estate market. Nobody wants to buy something that's going to be worth less in a few years. And that's what people fear in today's market. I think we can be the educators. They're looking, well, prices are going to crash. I'll wait till it crashes. Guys, no forecast have I read at all that says that that's going to happen. We're seeing a deceleration, but we're not seeing prices come down. We can help our prospects, buyers, sellers. We can help you as a buyer and seller to make wise decisions in this market. I'll end on this. I'm not suggesting that we're not in a market that's not going to be difficult or there's not going to be challenges, because there will be, no doubt. I really think this market is more difficult, certainly, than what we've seen in the last couple of years, in a big way. But I'll say this, there are a lot of folks in the last couple of years that found it impossible to go out and buy a house. They kept getting beat out. They dropped out of the process, out of frustration. They either couldn't win out on a bid or multiple offer scenarios, all those things we saw happening. And they just said, you know what, we're not going to do it. And they felt like the dream of home ownership was out of reach. It certainly costs more right now. It's more difficult, but it's not impossible. We're seeing inventory come back in the market. I think we're going to continue to see that. And certainly our job right now is to educate buyers and sellers, but more specifically right now, buyers, on the opportunity that's ahead, and always take into consideration how they feel about it. Listen to them. Be sensitive to it, but show them some of this kind of stuff, some of the numbers. Show them the numbers from your local market. Help them to see what's out there. So, guys, real quick, here's some of the resources I use. Like I said, I know you can take screenshots of this, come back, pause this video. I will put these, in the description here, so you can look these up and really get a handle on it as a buyer, as a seller, as a realtor. Okay. Hopefully this is helpful. Take some of these slides, you can use some of them in any presentations that you might do. And we're definitely in a shifting market. I'm probably going to try and come back and do this again here in a few weeks. We'll get some more numbers coming out here for this month that we're in right now. Definitely a time when things are changing, but definitely not a time to panic as a realtor. Definitely not a time to pull back if you're a buyer. Sellers, you need to price it right, okay? And get that advice from an expert. Get to the realtor, that you use, and sit down with them, have them go through the numbers, have them look at all the different price drops, look at everything going on. Don't chase the market down. In that sense, don't do all the price drops, become an old expired listing. Okay, we're starting to see those pick up. You can price it right. You can get it sold. We're still in a great time to buy. It's still a great time to sell. So anyway, guys, thank you very much. Appreciate your time in watching this. Hope this is helpful. I'll be back here to do this again here in just a couple, 2-3 weeks. We'll get the numbers out for July. We'll break all this down. We'll do it again. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day. Thank you.